Year 1998. Financial crisis in Southeast Asia. Kosovo War. Russian financial crisis. Russian economy's meltdown. 11 European countries agree on a single currency, the euro. The European Central Bank is established. When the ECB started its operations in 1999, it was handicapped by large uncertainties, an unstable international climate, but also the fact that the new bank had no track record were forcing it to build up a conservative reputation and earn credibility as a tough inflation fighter who is independent from European governments. Before the creation of the economic union, Germany was a low inflation country. So creating a monetary union with high inflation countries would reduce its welfare unless if it imposes some conditions. The condition was that the future European Central Bank would be a total copy of the German Bundesbank. Designing the structure of the European Central Bank according to the Bundesbank model would allow it to capitalize on the Bundesbank's reputation and credibility and would help to convince the public that the European currency would be at least as stable as the Deutschmark. Indeed, the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union explicitly sets out on its first line that the primary objective of the bank shall be to maintain price stability. This is why the initial 10 years were characterized by a tight monetary policy stance. The European Central Bank was remarkably successful in achieving price stability, except for the peak in energy and food prices in 2006-2007. Actual and core inflation, as well as inflation expectations, were stable and close to its target below 2%. During those first 10 years, the area enjoyed stable growth and low inflation, thanks to a dual economic model based on export-led growth in central countries and debt-led growth in peripheral ones. But in the second half of Trichett's tenure, the economic environment deteriorated dramatically. Years 2007-2010. Inflation started to accelerate after 2005 and the ECB tightened its policy. In 2007, dangers in the US credit markets became apparent and the crisis exploded with the Lehman collapse in September 2008. Greece, Ireland, Portugal and Cyprus asked the European Union for a total bailout and in exchange implemented macroeconomic adjustment programs. Spain was indirectly rescued with a loan of 100 billion euros to recapitalize its banks. Italian banks, among others, frequently asked the ECB for access to its cheap loans. The European Council had to come out with different strategies and policies to save countries that were forced to bail out their own national financial systems or that were victim of the instability in the public debt market. Year 2011. The Eurozone debt crisis didn't stop the European Central Bank raising interest rates for a second time this year as it focused on the day job of fighting inflation. After supporting banks with unlimited cash through the crisis, the ECB has moved to normalize European money markets. When the majority on the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee have chosen to ignore high inflation and argued for some time that interest rates need to stay at a record low of 0.5% to support the faltering economy, the European Central Bank, which sets monetary policy for the 17-country Eurozone, lifted its benchmark rate by a quarter of a point to 1.5%.
The decision that I just mentioned was a decision which was taken unanimously by the Governing Council. It is a decision which is taken to permit us to deliver in the future, as we did in the past, price stability in the medium term in line with our definition.
Given the proven link between independence and monetary stability, as shown by the Bundesbank example, the European Union created a super-independent central bank with little transparency and political accountability. However, contrary to a widespread perception, the Maastricht Treaty does not ask the ECB to focus on price stability exclusively, although this is, of course, the ECB's primary objective. The treaty also stipulates supporting economic growth and preserving financial stability, provided price stability is achieved. Once the ECB's reputation was established and price stability ensured, the European Central Bank could focus on the secondary objectives of growth and employment. Accordingly, the acute phase of the crisis came to the end when the ECB's president pledged that the ECB would do whatever it takes to save the euro. During last years, the European Central Bank has become a more political actor. And the following actions of the European Central Bank have shown the new policy direction, less conservative than before. On the 2nd August 2012, the Governing Council of the ECB announced that it would undertake outright transactions in secondary sovereign bond markets aimed at safeguarding an appropriate monetary policy transmission and the singleness of the monetary policy. It is the famous OMT. This program is considered by the European Central Bank once a Eurozone government asks for financial assistance. In fact, it's about as innovative a monetary policy instrument as has been advanced in recent years. The least we can say is that this measure isn't particularly conservative. The bank's emergency lending program doesn't fit the conservative label either. Under this program, national central banks in the Eurozone create their own reserves and lend them to banks that don't have enough quality collateral to go to the ECB's loan window. Due to the euro crisis, this is precisely the situation where the European Union finds itself in a politically engaged central bank rather than the feared politically used central bank. As well as the ECB's active politicization from the crisis, both in the short term of borrowing up member state debt and longer term as an institution increasingly involved in the running of the European economies, the ECB is being politicized by other actors who are imposing their own preoccupations into the institution. Most notably, the European Parliament has started trying to impose its will on the selection of the members of the Executive Board, despite the fact that this is traditionally one of the main tests of a central bank's independence. The ECB may have reached the limits of its political power for the time being. It remains conservative with deeds, but experimental with words. The European Central Bank may be increasingly political, but for a central bank, we should expect it to remain one of the least politically engaged among all those in developed economies.